The Sims is the ultimate in existential horror. Every moment I control a character, I cannot help but reflect on how my life is so similar to theirs as we follow our determinist paths, completely oblivious to our lack of free will. Mario Kart is about the endless samsara of competition. No one ever truly wins. You cross the finish line only to start again. Reborn, blue shell in hand, trapped in an infinite loop of karmic revenge. Okay, let's be real guys, Konami didn't do anything wrong. Have you ever seen something that disoriented you? That made you freeze up and question reality? Is the dress blue and black or white and gold? Is it the Berenstain Bears or the Berenstein Bears? Unless you're somebody like David Lynch, where he just accepts this dissonance as the product of living in somebody else's dream, it's typically a jarring event for the rest of us.
We live inside a dream.
Ideally, glitches in the Matrix or examples of the Mandela effect could be perfect for interactive forms of media, especially video games. It could elicit the most potent forms of existential dread, but aside from games like Metal Gear Solid or Spec Ops: The Line, few other games have explored this potentiality. That said, there is one game that I think did this extremely well, but the degree of its success in this regard isn't truly understood. That game is The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. Once again, I must thank my audience for helping me pick which Zelda game to play next, as I go through each of them for the first time. I put out a poll asking which of these 4 games to do first, and the comment section figuratively said, "Screw all those choices, you need to play Link's Awakening, Max." And when I asked why, I was told that the game was inspired by Twin Peaks. Seriously, there's no better way to sell me on a game than to say it was inspired by Twin Peaks. Don't even start typing Deadly Premonition in the comments section, I am well aware. But it's not so much Twin Peaks that made me pick up the game. It's the fact that the media people love hearing me talk about on this channel operate on the same metaphysical idea that Twin Peaks does, that the contents of our mind exist in parallel dimensions, and hypothetically, those dimensions could converge. In respect to Link's Awakening, one of the main things it is remembered for is featuring video game characters from other Nintendo properties. These include Super Mario, Kirby, and others. I imagine that people wanted me to turn on the theory crafting side of my brain and try to explain why these characters weren't just arbitrarily put into a Zelda game, but actually proved the existence of a Nintendo shared universe or something. Smash Bros. Doesn't count. To be honest, I don't think these cameos were put in there to secretly establish a shared universe, but I don't think they were put there arbitrarily. In my mind, the real reason for their inclusion is the same reason why David Lynch put a world-famous musician like David Bowie into the Twin Peaks movie. It's to disorient the viewer and make them see reality as the Japanese developers and many other Asian countries view the world. It's an illusion, a dream, and it's one we must wake up from to achieve enlightenment. Of course, this is a principle most heavily identified with Hinduism and Buddhism, which are traditions that have not only heavily inspired Japan, but the Zelda series. This is especially the case with Majora's Mask, Skyward Sword, and maybe above all, Link's Awakening. There are some ways in which this is obvious, but there are a lot of other hidden symbols that point to this being a valid interpretation. Symbols that many of us in the West have not picked up on for over 3 decades. Today, I'm going to point some of those symbols out. Before I do, be warned that this video will contain spoilers for Link's Awakening. If you don't want to spoil yourself, go play the original Game Boy versions or the remake on the Nintendo Switch. Finally, if you like the work I do here and want to help ensure its continuation, please consider supporting me on Patreon or joining my YouTube membership section. I will leave links to both of those in the description box below. Now, let's begin. The story of Link's Awakening takes place following the events of A Link to the Past and the Oracle of Seasons and Ages. Link travels by ship to distant lands in order to train himself to take on future threats. After his boat is destroyed during a storm at sea, Link washes ashore on Koholint Island. After recovering his sword, a talking owl appears out of nowhere and tells him that if he wishes to return home, he must wake the Windfish, who sleeps inside an egg at the top of a mountain. To do this, he must find the 8 instruments of the sirens hidden throughout the island. For most of the game, It is unclear why waking the windfish would result in our escape, until we begin our search for the 6th instrument. When Link enters an area known simply as the Ancient Ruins, he discovers a mural, which reveals that the entirety of Koholint Island is a dream made manifest by the windfish. By waking the windfish, the island will disappear, and Link will be able to sail away. Though this presents an initial moral quandary that maybe the peaceful denizens of the island don't wish to disappear, it is quickly forgotten about because, well, we gotta complete the mission. Actually, wow. I know I brought up Spec Ops The Line before, but man, I didn't realize how similar it is to Link's Awakening in that regard. Man, that's dark. Anyway, I will discuss that moral quandary in greater detail in a little bit. But for now, I want to bring the focus back to Hinduism and Buddhism. As I already said, the obvious parallel here is that reality is an illusory dream, and we need to wake up. But before I delve more into that, I want to start with some of the more esoteric references that people might not have noticed. At first, I wondered if the 8 instruments symbolized the 8-fold path of Buddhism, which one must follow in order to wake up from our false reality and achieve enlightenment. Now, while I do believe that this fits symbolically, I must admit that I initially had nothing else to prove that this was the intention of the developers. So I started to look at the instruments in order to see if I could find anything there. The first one we got was the full moon cello. Of course, the full moon is a very important Buddhist symbol for enlightenment, for its phases from new moon to full moon mark one's elevation from unconsciousness to higher consciousness. This is not my arbitrary imposition of value. One of the most famous Buddhist holidays is Vesak, which is one of, if not the most sacred day to the Buddhists. The name literally means day of the full moon, and the date marks the birth, enlightenment, and death of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. Encouraged by this, I moved on to the second instrument, the conch horn, and it is here that I found by far the most intriguing parallels. Very quickly, before I state what those are, I need to point out that the secret seashells that you collect throughout the game also appear to be conch-like in appearance. This is significant because the conch as a musical instrument, and as a valuable object to be exchanged for rewards, echo its function in those religious traditions. In Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, there is a concept known as the Ashtamangala, which translated to English means the 8 auspicious signs. Though which symbols are included in this framework differ from Hinduism to Buddhism to Jainism, one of the most consistent symbols across these religions is the conch. It is sacred as a musical instrument because it emits the primordial sound, the vibration that echoed across the universe when life began. That sound, of course, was Om. But why was this connection made between the sound a conch makes and the universal primordial musical note? The answer might lie with the Hindu god Vishnu. There are 2 stories from Hindu mythology regarding how Vishnu obtained his signature divine conch. In the Bhagavata, one of the 18 major Puranas in Hinduism, Vishnu, or to be more specific, Krishna, who was an avatar of Vishnu, slays a demonic whale named Panchajana. The conch shell was either the demon's dwelling place, or it was fashioned from Panchajana's bones. The other story is the Samudra Manthana, where gods and demons churned an ocean of milk to obtain Amrita, the nectar of immortality. One of the 14 unintended products of this churning was a conch. In both stories, Vishnu takes the conch and names it Panchajanya. Now Panchajanya, translated to English, means born of 5. The 5 in this case refers to multiple things, for 5 is a sacred number across Asia. It represents the 5 types of prana, or divine breath. It also represents the 5 primary Hindu goddesses, 3 of whom are the Tridevi, and might have been the inspiration for the 3 golden goddesses of Zelda. If you want to see the evidence for that, refer to this video, which I will link in the description box below. However, it seems that the primary thing that the number 5 is linked to in this regard are the 5 prakriti, which is the Sanskrit word for original substance. And these 5 original substances are the bhutas, or elements: earth, water, fire, wind, and void. In this sense, the conch represents both the primordial sound and substance of creation, hence why it is considered a sign of auspiciousness or prosperity. Through the conch, one figuratively wields the divine world-creating power, the light of the gods. In Link's Awakening, The collecting of both the conch horn and the secret seashells that look like conches to get rewards symbolizes its religious function, both as a sign of wealth, but also as a sign of karmic purification. After all, the conch is used in Hindu religious ceremonies to purify an area before a ritual is performed, as per the Yajurveda, for example. The more Link collects these conch shells, the more he symbolically prepares himself for enlightenment. Now, for those who watched my video on Majora's Mask, or even my most recent video on Silent Hill F, you might have noticed the parallel between the Hindu concept of the 5 Bhuta and the Buddhist concept of the 5 Tathagata, which I and other Zelda YouTubers like Zeltic have linked to the 4 Moon Children and Link. This is because the 5 Tathagata, or the 5 greatest Buddhas in the Buddhist pantheon, sit at the basis of all reality, just like the 5 Bhuta. Moreover, they also represent the 5 Bhuta in the Shingon and Vajrayana Buddhist traditions. By either uniting the elements and/or uniting the virtues that the 5 Tathagata represent within oneself, one can achieve the unlimited power of nirvana. This is exactly what Link does when he unites the 4 giant masks at the end of the game and gets the Fierce Deity mask. As the aforementioned Zeltic pointed out, the Fierce Deity is a reference to Fudo Myo-o, the wrathful form of the Center Tathagata, Vairocana, or as the Japanese call him, Dainichi. When enlightenment is achieved, the mind of the Buddhist becomes akin to a Vajra, or a lightning bolt. Just as lightning cuts across the sky, a mind like a lightning bolt can pierce the veil of reality and achieve enlightenment. With this in mind, no pun intended, how appropriate is it that the last instrument that Link retrieves in the game is the Thunder Drum? If the 8 instruments are symbolic of the eightfold method of achieving enlightenment, then having lightning painted on the final instrument suits this possibility. One last thing on the subject of Nirvana unfolding in a 5-fold manner. I noticed that the portals that pop up in the dungeons appear to symbolize and/or operate on this same metaphysical principle. Notice the 4 light balls circling around the center void. Let's speculate that the 4 light balls represent the 4 cardinal Tathagatas and their elements, and the center is the limitless void that one can travel through to any location. That would parallel nicely with the 4 giant masks and the moon children that wear them in Majora's Mask, who circle around a center point, the place where Link becomes the Fierce Deity, where he embodies the void of ultimate reality, of the center Buddha. Before I move from the symbolic Buddhist elements of Link's Awakening and into the thematic, there are a few other smaller potential references to Hinduism and Buddhism. The red coral on the triangle might reference the Hindu/Buddhist concept of Saptaratna, or what the Japanese refer to as Shippo. The Shippo are the 7 auspicious treasures of Amita Buddha, who is the Western Tathagata, by the way. In Amita's abode, known as the Pure Land, there are 7 treasures that are omnipresent, one of which is coral. Now granted, the original sources do not specify the coral as red, but later Chinese and Japanese interpretations give it the color red. One other potential justification for this link is that Shippo is the name given to this decorative pattern that stems from Japanese culture, which features a series of interlocking circles. This pattern is omnipresent in The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, so I have to think that the developers made this inclusion to make an even stronger connection to these traditions. Admittedly, beyond these 4 instruments, I struggle to make connections to the other 4. The only other one, potentially, is that the bell might be a reference to the Vajra bell, which is a common symbol in other Japanese games like the aforementioned Silent Hill F, as well as Sekiro and Kuon. But even I admit that's a little stretch. Nonetheless, I don't believe the lack of connection to the other instruments invalidates the inspiration. There are other potential references to Hinduism and Buddhism throughout the game beyond the instruments, namely the other 8 auspicious symbols. One of the other 8 symbols is a kalasha, a container with jewels in it. Depending on the interpretation or the religion, that container is either a vase, a pitcher, or a pot. In Link's Awakening, and various other Zelda games, we see various containers with rupees in them, in the form of what look like vases, pitchers, jars, and pots, and a lot of them look like traditional kalasha. There's also the inclusion of the lotus flower in Link's Awakening and other games like Skyward Sword, And there's also the Dharma Chakra, aka the 8-spoked wheel, which symbolizes the Eightfold Path. In Link's Awakening, specifically the Switch version, this might be referenced with the outdoor portals. Then again, I also like to interpret it as a conch shell when viewed from the top down, but who knows. If we accept that Link's Awakening was heavily inspired by Buddhism, there is still that nagging moral problem that the game seems to gloss over. Why should Link, and by extension the player, be okay with letting the denizens of Koholint Island disappear? Did they not have lives? Did they not have hopes, wishes, and dreams for the future? This is understandably perplexing to the Western mind, for we tend to exalt the human will, the human ego, as something that should continue, even beyond death, until it reaches divinity. Though the Eastern mind seeks divinity as well, it tends to do so through a dissolution of the ego, through a negation of the will. To prolong the ego is what the nightmare enemies wish to do in Link's Awakening, because they do not know that the greatest gift of all comes not from clinging to the illusory world that keeps their egos alive. It comes from letting go, and becoming one with the light of Nirvana, as Koholint Island does at the end of the game. This isn't nihilism, nor is it tragic. It's transcendence. To be one with Nirvana, with the Dharma, is to be like a fish in the water, which is at least partially why one of the 8 auspicious symbols of Buddhism is fish. It's also why the first avatar of the aforementioned Vishnu was Matsya, a small fish that grew into a mighty being. It did this by helping guide the primordial man, Manu, through the tumultuous waters at the beginning of the world. To be like a fish in the ocean is to float in the all-pervading essence of life, to become adaptable and resilient, so one can become free from fear or desire. I have to believe that this is at least in part why the developers of the game came up with the concept of the windfish, adorned with what look like Hindu and or Buddhist mandalas on its back. To be like the windfish is to have a body that is so strong it can go beyond even the restraint of the ocean. And also, to be like the windfish is to have a mind that is so strong that it can turn one's dreams into reality. I want to offer special thanks to Gaming University, a fellow YouTuber and massive Zelda fan, who helped to look over my ideas and critique them where necessary. Please go check out his channel, which I will link in the description box below. Also, special thanks to Indy, another massive Zelda fan who did the same thing, and also did the thumbnail art. Remember to give this video a like if you liked it, and let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Until next time, remember to stay safe and stay yellow.